Hey there, I'm Alex Kidman, and this is the Motorola Moto Tag. Let's get into the review. Now, looking at the Moto Tag, this reminds me of something. Can't think what it is. So yeah, okay, obviously, Motorola's Moto Tag is very similar to Apple's take on a tracking tag in terms of size and even to a certain extent feel. Now that's a good thing, I suppose, if you want to buy accessories, because you could buy accessories for either and they'll fit both. But of course, the proof of the pudding here is not so much in that question of what do they look like, it's what can they do? How well can they track things that I've lost or things that I don't want taken from me? So I'm going to put that to the test. And specifically, I'm going to put that to the travel test. Go on a little travel adventure. I'm going to take this Moto Tag here, and this AirTag, and this tile, and I'm going to put them in my luggage as I fly from Sydney, Australia, through to Tokyo, Japan, and Sapporo, Japan as well. Seeing how closely I can track my luggage from all three tags, which will be in the same suitcase, just to see how well their tracking systems work, how quickly I can find out if my luggage has been lost, because that's a really common use case for these things, and anything else that makes the Moto Tag a better buy than the others. Now, there is an obvious point that I've got to make here. The Apple AirTag obviously only works within the Apple ecosystem. You've got to have an iPhone, that kind of thing. So if you're an Android user, obviously, it's out of contention. The tile works across both, but if you've seen my review of that, you'll know that there are some issues there. I'm really keen to see how well this one will run. And it is, of course, Android only, although it's not only Motorola. Any Android phone can hook into this because it's using Google's own Find My architecture to do so. But I'd better get packing. But before I get to packing, I just want to put a few quick notes on the install process for the Moto Tag, because it's kind of messy. It's kind of messy because while it relies on Google's Find My architecture, and that's the first app that you have to register it with, Motorola also has its own Moto Tags app for Android phones, and that one's considerably messier. It's frequently hit me with issues where it hasn't recognized the tags there. Firmware updates, even though they're quite small, have failed to update or just taken ages to update. And then the two key features it offers, which are remote finding the phone it's paired to, so you can use the button on the tag to find your phone, and as a remote shutter, I've not been able to get to work at all. Both rely on some battery permissions, which I have enabled and disabled and re-enabled time and time again. The app refuses to see that I've enabled them, so I've simply not been able to test them. If those features are important to you, then be aware that, admittedly, on non-Motorola phones, and maybe they're super specific to Motorola, I'm not entirely sure, but on non-Motorola phones, they don't seem to work at all. Now, on with my travel adventure. First up, putting all three trackers into my luggage. Now, they all sat on an inner liner within this suitcase, so that none of them had a particular advantage over the other in terms of placement or proximity. Obviously, I can't control what the airline does with them in terms of how they move around, but they're all in the same compartment, in the same suitcase, to give them an equal shot. So a quick update on the tags. It's interesting, actually, sitting here at Sydney Airport. We've put the bag in and checked its location on all three tag services. And what's interesting here is that the Apple AirTag and the tile that I have basically agree on where it is, and that's probably a loading bay. I don't know for sure, of course. The Moto Tag has it somewhere slightly different. Of course, I can't know for sure whether or not the other two are completely off base and Moto Tag's completely right, but they've both agreed that they've at least moved from when we checked them in because they're not there anymore. So a little bit of tracking is taking place across all three networks. I will try and see if I can actually do this as well on the plane, because they should logically be loaded on the plane and think they're quite close to me. Otherwise, I will check them when we land in Haneda. So I wasn't actually able to check them before we took off. I got rather busy with actually getting into my seat and stuff like that. Kind of tricky when you're in the middle seat. But I was able to check them when we landed, albeit that I couldn't film when the luggage arrived because you're in the baggage arrival hall. You're not allowed to film there. They'll arrest you. I wasn't keen on that. And at Haneda, I had a very pleasant surprise because not only did my luggage show up, which is always pleasing, but all three trackers basically tracked to the same time, or just about the same time, in terms of when they picked up, hey, your luggage has actually made it to Japan. I've got a screenshot of this, with the slight caveat that I know the timestamp on the Tile one is later. That's simply because the actual screenshot that I took failed to take on the iPhone for some reason. I'm not sure why. So while it's timestamped a little bit later, it's worth noting that it actually detected it just about the same time as all the other trackers did, which is exactly what you want. Next stop was Sapporo, and I tested again to see how long it would take for my bags to arrive and to make sure that they actually made the trip from Haneda. And the good news there is they did. I didn't screenshot this particular one. The Tile here lagged a little bit behind the other two in terms of when it picked up the suitcase, but it wasn't a huge problem. I knew that it was there, obviously, and it arrived within a minute or two of actually being detected, because that's more likely when it was near phones that could detect it in the first place. Travel isn't just about whether your bags do in fact make it to your destination, though that's always preferable. So I also used my head-to-head testing approach one day while out and about in Tokyo once I'd returned there. My hotel was in Akihabara, but on a specific day I was checking out the Gotokuji Lucky Cat Temple in Setagaya in Tokyo's west, quite a distance from there, and I was interested to ensure that my luggage was still in my room where I'd left it. Spoiler, it was. Japan's pretty safe that way. But here in tracking terms, the Moto Tag had a very slight edge on the AirTag, having been seen by the network 3 minutes prior, where Apple's network was 4 minutes behind. There's not a lot in a minute, of course. Both were preferable to Tile's effort, where the Tile Tag hadn't actually been seen for half an hour. There's a lot that can happen to luggage in 30 minutes, though thankfully nothing actually had. And my end assessment of all this comparative testing is that while I rely strongly on Google's Find My Network, and it will be interesting to see how any competitors on the same network stack up once their trackers are available, it's essentially as good as an AirTag and arguably a bit better than a Tile for this kind of luggage tracking. One nice note here is that because I was running the tracking tests across two phones, both were equally diligent in letting me know that I was travelling with a mystery tag, with the iPhone spotting the Moto Tag and the Samsung phone spotting the AirTag at similar kinds of times. I do prefer that level of scrutiny to avoid cyberstalking, although I appreciate some may not, as it also potentially alerts thieves that they're travelling with tracked items. On the battery front, I tested it over the month, and Motorola's claim for the Moto Tag is that it's capable of up to a year's operation before its CR2032 battery requires replacement. You only get the most basic of battery meters within the Moto Tag app, however, and after a month's worth of intermittent usage, it simply tells me that the battery is okay. So all I can really say on that front is that at least a month's worth of usage from the provided battery is achievable, but clearly this could vary over time and vary quite a bit if you threw in a particularly cheap off-brand battery when it went flat. So overall, look, Motorola's effectively first out of the gate in terms of providing a tracking tag using Google's Find My system, and the Motorola Moto Tag does have that feel of a version 1 device. Its core tracking is fine, actually very good, really, matching up nicely with Apple's competing AirTag and offering a similar but not quite identical level of tracking of whatever you attach it to. However, the dual app approach and bugginess of the Moto Tag app is something that Motorola really does need to address. I'd love to say that the shutter and phone finding features work because that would give them a real utility hook and edge, but right now, they simply don't.